Welcome, Priya, to the World XP podcast. Samir, welcome back, of course, and thank you for bringing me another rather impressive guest. I must say. For those listening, let's do. So there's a lot of things that for those listening that we want to kind of cover in this episode. Samir has gone through his elevator pitch at least four times now, I think, or maybe three or four. Samir, do you want to do yours first, and then Priya will get into your intro, and then we'll hop into the rest of the episode.
So I'm Samir Varma. I am the author of the book you see back there over my shoulder called The Science of Free Will. It talks about all kinds of interesting things, including things like why Nobel Prize economists don't understand tax policy. Um, I am by profession a hedge fund manager, and by training, I am a physicist. And so I guess I am a scientist that likes to dabble in the financial markets.
Priya?
Hi, good to have you. Thank you for having me over here. And I'm usually the anchor, so usually my intro works the other way around. It's to be on the other side of the camera is pretty interesting. I am Priya Sahgal. I've been a journalist for the past 3 decades. I'm based in India, from where I host 3 shows for a television network called NewsX. They're political shows, but 2 of them, and one of them is a show that's based on women. It's on women's issues. Apart from which, I've authored 2 books and several chapters in various books, all political, mostly about the current prime minister. I've also done a review of various prime ministers of India and the future generation of leaders, so the next prime ministers. So that's about it. I'm looking forward to this conversation, as I said. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is a surprise for you, which you didn't seem to like in the WhatsApp, but I had to surprise you with the question from the last guest. It makes it a good tradition. So, actually, he left me with two, so maybe it's double to surprise. But you know what? I'll ask you both for funsies. It'll be good. First one is, if you could have any superpower, what would you choose?
Mine first.
Yeah.
Uh, to read people's minds. I'm a journalist. I want to know what you're not telling me.
That's a good answer. Samir?
Oh, my answer is very simple. I would like the superpower to teach politicians economics.
That's even tougher than mine.
Clip that, put it on YouTube. Okay. And then the next one is, I think, a bit more interesting. Well, not the first one is also interesting, but if you could bring one person back to life, who would it be and why? Priya, I'll start with you.
Not a personal note. I'll go with the political note. I think Nehru. I think country needs Nehru. We're living at a time in India. We're living at a time where we've seen our first prime minister being so vilified and so even built up also more than normal. So I want to get to know the real Nehru because he laid the foundations of free India. The India that we know today was those were interesting times to be in, and I would love to have him back.
Yeah, fair enough. Good answer. Samir?
Well, I'm a physicist, so my geekiness will come out. I want to bring back a guy called Richard Feynman.
Hmm.
Um, in my opinion, probably the second or third best physicist of the 20th century. And he died way too young. And who knows how many other things he could have done if he had not died at whatever, 65, 64, something or the other. He was an amazing, amazing character, as I think many people know.
So if you say second or third, who's one and two?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, everybody says Einstein must be one,
Yeah.
right, by definition. And then you're left with an enormous number of choices for number two. So that's why I picked him as three.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll let you off. I won't make you say one. Okay, so in current events for those listening, there's been I guess is it conflict is the word that we'll use between India and Pakistan. Is that a fair word to use? Maybe not war completely.
Yes.
So Priya, if you want to give so for me, and I don't know, I'm not gonna speak for Samir, but for me, I saw a headline. It was like, okay, India and Pakistan are fighting, and it's like for me, it's like, okay, I knew they're kind of maybe not getting along so well, but it seemed like out of nowhere for me, and I don't know if that is accurate or not at all. So can you give maybe some background and then kind of background and then what the situation is like currently as we speak? Because I think the last like this is happening as of like 1, 2, 3 days ago, so very, very recent, as of May, what are we at, 12th, as of recording. So yeah, if you want to start with that,
Well,
and then we
on
can
May
go from there.
12th, Yeah, we actually stopped fighting around May 12th. But you're saying it's not, you're surprised, but this is not something new for us because, what actually is happening on our India-Pakistan border is there have been random and very consistent acts of terror carried out by terrorists based in Pakistan on Indian soil. This is not propaganda. This is something India has proved with proof this time. We've seen, on the line of control, there have been skirmishes, but they've been also coming into India and carrying out acts of terror. And ever since the Modi government came in, early on there was a protocol in place, there was an agreement in place, we will not cross the line of control. But I think for the last 10 years, there has been, so many incidents, especially after the Mumbai attack, when they came and, created, they took over these hotels, Taj Hotel, they breached the hotel, they had, there was this mass, what do you call it, kidnapping, and, it was a total random act of terror, not kidnapping, sorry. So after that, we've kind of taken a decision that if something like that happens, we will retaliate and we will cross the line of control and go there and attack terrorist camps. India has been very clear, we will attack terror camps. Now, last month on 22nd April, what happened was we all saw how 26 tourists who had come to Kashmir, to Pahalgam, were gunned down by 4 terrorists. Then India, we did our research. We found out they were based, they were sent by terror groups based in Pakistan. And then India decided we are going to retaliate. We didn't cross the line of control, but we did send in, ammunition and, missiles, whatever, to the terror camps. And we targeted terrorist infrastructure at 9 sites in Pakistan. Pakistan took this as an act of war, and they said, oh, you breached our territory, you come in. And they said, of course, you've killed civilians. We said, no, we haven't killed civilians. We have taken very precise controlled targets. Pakistan went out to town saying India has, initiated war. We are saying we didn't initiate war. We were responding to an act of terror. But Pakistan attacked us back, and then we repelled the attack, and then we went in and attacked their air bases. At which point, now here the story, I'm going to give you India's version, which is we had, of course, since we are both nuclear power states, there was a lot of focus on what's happening in India. The United States was also reaching out amongst other countries. We know that J.D. Vance spoke to the DGMOs, or the air chief in, the army chief in Pakistan. Pakistan was saying, let us cease hostilities, at which point he conveyed the message to India, and India agreed for talks. However, before we could announce the ceasefire or an understanding, as we call it, President Trump, trigger happy that he is, he went on Truth Social, Twitter, etc., and he announced that there is a ceasefire on, and then he took credit for it, and he's been saying that I'm the one. He's talking like an nanny that I got these two to come to the table, and I'm the one who brokered the peace. Now we know Trump is looking for some sort of validation since he couldn't get peace between Ukraine and Russia, but yes, US did play a role, no denying that. But the fact that he took credit for it, the fact that he announced it before either India or even Pakistan could, hasn't gone down well in India. We are seeing this because we've always had that Kashmir is an internal issue between two countries. So why is why is the United States intervening or mediating, even if it is behind the scenes? Don't go around, announcing it. What you did was maybe tell me that Pakistan wants to talk, and tell Pakistan, okay, India will listen to you. You didn't really say, both of you come down to the table and talk. But the narrative that Trump is saying is that, no, I pulled them by the ears and made them sit down and said, if you don't talk, I won't do trade with you. Or some, stuff like that. So the messaging from Trump hasn't gone down well in India. As far as India and Pakistan are concerned, there is a ceasefire. But now India has kind of upped the, what you may call it, the standard, saying that any act of terror will now be seen as an act of war. So that is our takeaway from this incident. A lot of skeptics in India, warmongers, are saying, why did you agree to a ceasefire when you've gone and attacked the air bases? You've got the upper hand in the narrative. You should have gone ahead, as Indira Gandhi did in 1971, and demolished Pakistan, broken it into various countries. There are parts of Pakistan that want independence, like Balochistan, etc. Go ahead and finish the task. Why have this neighbor on our doorstep? Because every now and then we have some random act of terror, some more than the others, but every day there are some skirmishes or the other. However, for whatever reasons, and also, a lot of innocent lives were being lost, because while we were targeting terrorists, Pakistan was coming across and hitting civilian homes. the decision was taken to stop the ceasefire, to stop the hostilities. And let's see, it's a very fragile peace, but as of now, there is peace.
Okay, so I've got a few thoughts. One is that the like splitting the terrorism versus the state actor seems to be quite the difficult situation. We see kind of parallels between this and the Israel-Gaza situation where they say, okay, well, we're going to go get this terrorist group, and then there's people that are not part of the terrorist group that are stuck in the middle of it. And then I saw a few things on Twitter where it was like, okay, yeah, because Netanyahu's doing this, now Modi can go do this to Pakistan. And then, of course, the big difference is Hamas doesn't have nukes, whereas Pakistan does. How is India drawing the line between, right? You mentioned any act of terror will now be seen as an act of war. Like, is there nuance in that? Or like, is the understanding or the thought that any act of terror coming from a group that is residing in Pakistan is the responsibility of the Pakistani government because they're there? Like, where's the line kind of drawing between? Because that seems like it can get very messy very quickly in a way that people would like, in a way that is not good. So,
A good question. In fact, we're also trying to figure that one out. Hmm.
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, but I did ask, sorry if I may continue. I did ask that question to Shashi Tharoor. He's an Indian member of parliament, former external affairs minister. So
Okay.
he answered, he's saying, supposing there is, some a random man comes and self detonates or blows up a bomb in a crowded marketplace in Lajpat Nagar in Delhi. Do we take that as an act of terror or see it as what? Because an act of war is the line is very the reaction will be very huge. So he said probably not. We will not treat that as an act of terror. We will have to evaluate each incident and see where it comes from. If it is on the scale of Pahalgam, where 26 tourists were gunned down by four men, terrorists, armed terrorists, and then of course we didn't react immediately. We waited 3 weeks. We found out where the links were to the Jaish-e-Mohammed, to the groups in Pakistan. So we made that connection and then we went in. So I think there will be some kind of a mature approach because India is not really a trigger happy country in that sense. We are also a democratic country. There is a lot of checks and balances in place in India vis-a-vis Pakistan.
Okay. Samir, do you have questions thus far?
Yeah, I was actually just wondering, really, the problem with nuclear weapons really is that you can't actually use them, can you? Because using a nuclear weapon puts you yourself in a really terrible situation. So, I guess I've never quite understood what the Indians' side strategic worry is vis-a-vis Pakistan, because you would think that it's the sort of thing that they would want to go in and clean up, but they don't want to do that. And they know better than I do. But I'm just surprised that typically it's always put down to nuclear weapons. But the problem is, let's say that the Indians decide that they want to go just a little bit across the border. Is that the time Pakistan fires its nukes? No. Okay, good. So then a week later they say, oh, okay, well, I think we're going to go a little bit further across the border. Does Pakistan fire its nukes then? No. And so on. Salami tactics, they're called. So it seems to me it's the sort of thing you could do if you really wanted to do. And by and large, I think that the terrorist camps are not that far from the border in the first place. So I'm just a little surprised that nothing has happened. There must be good reasons for it. I don't know. I'm just curious as to what the reasons are.
Well, I think the nuclear works as a deterrent more than anything else, and also, do we really want to take over Pakistan? You've seen the shape Pakistan is in. What India would really like to do is to take back Pakistan occupied Kashmir. That's really, the trophy for us, and that's what we're after as much as they're after our, the entire Kashmir. In fact, they want to take back. They think it's their rights, but actually, the history of Kashmir. So I don't think we would like to, I think December Pakistan totally, because that's a mess that nobody wants to take credit for also. at the end of the day. The joke, I don't know, on Twitter is that if you take Lahore, the next day you'll tell us, you'll give it back to us because nobody wants that mess also.
Yeah, that
So,
may
but
be
yeah,
it actually.
like we could do what Indira Gandhi did. Yeah, break up Balochistan, break it up even further. Maybe that is something that the warmongers are asking the current government to do.
Can you mentioned the history of Kashmir for the people listening? Can you give a little bit of background and context so they have some sort of like way to frame the discussion?
This is, at the time of independence, India was, a collection of a lot of princely states also. So then they were, most of the states were given, a couple of them who were near the border of Pakistan were given the choice of staying with India or Pakistan, and mostly went in with the, majority, if they were Muslim majority or Hindu majority, and they chose likewise. Kashmir at that time was ruled by Hindu king Maharaja Hari Singh, who took his time to decide. Meanwhile, the Pakistan sent, a force. They were not the Pakistani army, but they were, they what do you call it, independent fighters to come and try and take over Pakistan. At which point, take over Kashmir. At that point, Maharaja Hari Singh threw in his lot with India, but he agreed to a special status. He said that, in Kashmir would have its own flag. It would, also have its own Sadar-e-Riyasat, which is like a prime minister. And, there was different conditions. But by and large, they did accede to India. This continued. We gave them special status later on under something called Article 370, which was saying that, apart from defense and other communication and issues, you could be governed, you could have your own, governance. They even had their own flag. So this is something that kept Kashmir apart from the rest of India. At which point the BJP made it their part of the agenda, saying that why is one state given special status and should not be, amalgamated, because one of the conditions was that the rest of India could not own property in Kashmir. There were various what do you call conditions that were laid down. Uh, I think it was in 2000. Not 19, 2000, yeah, 2019, I think, they revoked Article 370. The Prime Minister Modi won his second term, and he went ahead and he took away the Article 370. And since then, there has been a lot of unrest in the valley, because the people were protesting that the special status was taken away. But at the same time, and the state was lost its statehood, it was made a union territory, put under governor's rule. We saw that, a lot of peace in terms, whether it was a fragile peace, but there was some kind of peace returning, because now it was directly under the control of the center. The elements that were creating, there were a lot of political leaders were put into under house arrest for about 7-8 months. Then there was COVID, of course. So we had our first elections only 6 months ago and it's still a union territory. It's not been given statehood. So that sentiment is also simmering. But I think by and large, I also went and covered the elections over there. For the first time, I saw, there is a state called within Srinagar, there is Lal Chowk, which is the busiest marketplace, and it's like a very symbolic site. It had the clock tower and all. There were people there at night, 11, 12 o'clock. I had not seen that for a very long time. People were, it was like any other hill station bustling marketplace. At that time, I also interviewed the chief minister, who's now currently the chief minister of the state. He was fighting his election, Omar Abdullah, and he said, look, this is a fragile piece. We don't know what is. And while we were, in his election campaign, we went off to a slightly far out place, not near the urban centers. And before his cavalcade came, I saw the sniffer dogs. I saw the police, the local military coming. I mean, the army presence was there also, and desanitizing the area, sanitizing the area. So that's when he said, look, all this is still going on. It's not that we're totally free. And but that narrative was there. I mean, we saw how the terrorists sneaked into Pahalgam, which is, very much in the center. It's not a border area. So there was some help from some locals, which we are trying to prove. But after that, what happened is the locals there, they did not want this happening because tourism was coming back. The state, the Union Territory was picking up. There was going to be statehood was going to be restored soon. So there has been a lot of resentment from the locals who we thought would be angry, at the BJP or at the center for coming and imposing. They say, look, we want tourism back. We want things to go back to normal. So that's been a very heartening takeaway from all this. If Pakistan was trying to say that people in Kashmir are unhappy, what has come out actually is that the locals want things to continue. They want, post 370, they want the, business to carry on as usual. They're not nursing this huge resentment and huge anger that we had thought may be happening on ground.
Okay, I'm digesting. Um, so as okay, so with that background and kind of the conflict that is taking place with Pakistan, and you mentioned that Trump goes in and try and is taking credit for he's tweeting and all these things that he does. Um, what is the view of the U.S. generally speaking in recent times? And the reason I ask this, aside from the context of what we're talking about, is every time I have somebody from a different country on, I always ask them this, like, what's your view of the US? Because internally, we are seeing, and Samir can speak to this as well, we can have one issue and we can basically say, close our eyes and say, that outlet will say it's good and that outlet will say it's bad. And regardless of what it is, and it's like, it's almost a joke, like to a certain point. Most of the time, people are like, "Yeah, it seems like you guys are going nuts," and to a certain extent, that is true. Then there's other people that would say, "No, we need to go on this path to whatever." It's much more nuanced than the whole country has gone bananas, and I think Samir, you would probably agree with that to some extent as well. So, what is the general view like of happenings here within the political kind of I've seen some tweets from Trump saying Modi's if I recall correctly, I could be making this up. So I'm gonna say it and then I'm going to Google it very quickly. But I saw some tweets from Trump saying that he likes Modi and he's a so strong and powerful leader and all these things. And let me go. I'll let you answer while I Google this and make sure I didn't just lie on camera. Um, but what's the view of the U.S. Over in India?
I think Samir will be better at this, but I'll just give you the Indian view and I mean what's happening on ground over here is that yes, Modi did think or does think that he has a very special friendship with Donald Trump. He even went and campaigned for Trump during the last elections, if you remember, in that
Hmm.
Howdy Modi event where he said "Ab ki bar Trump Sarkar," which means that's a slogan in India saying please elect the same government again, or vote for Trump. Sarkar means Trump government. So he did that in the last elections. But this time around, when the Trump versus Kamala Harris round, Modi was there in September for the United Nations General Meeting, but he did not campaign or even, we were told that people from Trump's camp reached out saying, let's do another such, rally or meeting with the Indian diaspora over there, since Modi is pretty popular. But India had said no. So that I think did not go down well with the with Trump when he moved into the Oval Office. But beyond that, there has been because friendships, yes, personalities matter, but there are also two institutions, India and US. There is an institutional history and give and take that goes on. Trump and Modi have decent equation, and but what Modi thinks decent, what Trump thinks decent doesn't translate on ground, because we saw what happened during the tariffs. He singled out India for mention, in fact, initially, and then of course we've gone and negotiated a ceasefire of sorts for 3 months, but we haven't really been singled out for any special friends benefit in that sense. On India and Pakistan, of course, I said again how India has always said we don't want third party mediation. The way the Trump administration has handled it. So we are also hoping that, this is Trump being Trump. He's not, is it this the institutional American response, or just Trump taking credit without really understanding the nuances of the situation? We're trying to figure Trump out, but unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot of this, again, a lot of right wingers in India were very happy when Trump was chosen, because it was again, this whole thing about make America great again. We are having the same sentiment here. Nationalism becomes, an answer for anything. Any criticism of the government is answered by, oh, you're being anti-national. Oh, Indians are getting cheated out of what? You are just bringing us Western propaganda. So this whole thing about, India first, America first was resonating a lot with a lot of Modi fall camp followers also. But suddenly when Trump turned against, didn't give us special benefits on tariff, and what he said recently has, sent a lot of shockwaves amongst the right wingers. Let's see how they react now. But, there has been a sort of reality check as far as Trump is concerned.
Yeah, he tends to do that, surprise people. Um, once in a while. How about with the media from the standpoint of like, I think here in the US, if you ask people if they watch like the news networks, most people would laugh. Be like, no, I don't watch that nonsense. I think is that a fair assessment, Samir? Would
Yes, I
you
think it's
agree?
a very fair assessment,
Yeah.
except for the highly partisan.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And so a lot of people are getting their news from, there's been a lot of rise of I'll call like independent sources, like kind of journalists on, I'll say journalists on the ground that are kind of not, I'll say beholden to um big advertisers or things like that. You've got people like Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald and people like this doing good work on Substack and things of that nature. It's like very independent. A lot of people have gone in that direction. Have you guys experienced a similar dissemination from like the main news kind of or journalistic outlets? Like nobody reads the New York Post or New York Times anymore, or Washington Post or things like that here, which are like, if you were to ask people, "Oh, what's the biggest newspaper in America?" Like no, like those names have become kind of laughing stocks to a certain extent. Have you got have Has there been a similar shift in India as well? Or how is like or are you guys looking at that saying like what is going on over there, or like what's the dynamic?
Oh, very much so. We are, sorry, should I take this, Samir?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Very much so. Because yeah, sorry. What's happening here is pretty similar also, though we haven't really reached. People are still reading the newspapers. What is happening is our first port of call really is the social media. That's where, you're getting your news from. What we're getting from mainstream channels and is unfortunately views. And it is partisan, and it is mostly, a lot of it is pro-government. There's a reason for this, because, the model of funding is mostly government ad based. We don't do much from subscriptions. Most funding comes from ads, and as you know, it is the government which has the largest, deepest pockets. So that is how they manage to control the narrative. This is again not something new. It's been done with every government, but with this government it is much more, I mean, the intensity is much more. One of the reasons, of course, is that here, earlier on you could criticize, for instance, when there was a Congress government in power, each minister was like a sort of a chieftain by himself. So if I criticized the finance minister, he would call up and say, why are you criticizing me? Or if I criticize the home minister, he would call up and say, don't criticize me. And then one would negotiate whatever, the thing was. But here, you can criticize anybody, a decision of the home ministry, finance ministry, even the cultural ministry. And the target is the prime minister, because it's a one-man government. Every decision is taken is the prime minister's. It's, it's the cult of Modi, which is why, the whole narrative is also built up, and there is pressure, because you cannot say anything is taken personally against Modi, and then you have these people who are loyal, more loyal than others, coming, calling, saying, why are you doing this, why are you doing that? So there is this a little bit pressure, you could say. But there are ways of getting around it. We've seen a lot of people go off, a lot of YouTube channels have sprung up. Most of the, the criticism of the government comes from these YouTube channels, independent websites, networks. So the mainstream media has, not really, people look at it with a lot of skepticism. I am a part of a mainstream media channel. So there are a couple which are still holding forth. And the idea really is not to go, gung ho about the opposition. The tragedy is the opposition is not doing anything great either. They are not combating the Modi government. They do it in fits and starts. They are not united. They don't have a very, charismatic leader. So there is a lot of, when the media is saying, whenever we criticize Modi, then they say, who next? But who are you putting up against Modi? Not who are you putting up, but who is the answer to Modi? Who does the public see as the answer to Modi also? We have the leader of opposition, Rahul Gandhi, who of late, I must say, has tried to change the narrative. He's got his act together. I do hope he keeps it up just for the sake of a good opposition. We need a strong, credible opposition at the end of the day, which also helps us the narrative in terms of media reporting. Because, if you're criticizing someone, then who are you praising? Who are you propping up? The task becomes much more difficult, even for those who want to appear neutral and give one side and the other side. It's we are equally critical of the opposition. So the opposition is saying that you are just pro government. We are not pro government. We're just saying that you guys haven't got your act together either. So there is that problem also that we are facing.
It sounds familiar, doesn't it, Eric?
Yeah, I would
Because
say so.
we have the same issue, right? I mean, everybody's more loyal than the king when it comes to the president. I was laughing my head off the other day when Jon Stewart on a thing a couple of weeks ago showed the cabinet agreeing with every crazy thing that Trump said in the cabinet room. Oh yes, sir, that is such an amazing statement, this kind of thing. And you're looking at this saying, this is not what you expect in a cabinet, but that's what happens. And then the same thing, with let's say the New York Times or the Washington Post. They write the news that will appeal to their readers. And so they're going to create the news that their readers will pay for. It doesn't have to actually be news. It just has to be that which the readers want to hear. And because the readers are the ones paying the bills. And so they have the same problem, it seems, over in India. The government's paying the bills for the main channels. So you got to say what the government says.
Yeah.
Whoever's the gold makes the rules. That's what you've got. It's really interesting. It's
You know what's
so parallel.
what's interesting here, Samir, is within the Trump kind of camp, the independent voices are debating a lot on a lot of different things, because there's plenty of people in the Trump camp that think his tariffs were not a good idea, um, and various other kind of policies like maybe his support for Israel or other things. And there's been a lot of debates, but it's been more within the independent kind of the YouTube independent media within that, which I find very interesting, because the kind of the New York Times types will take that and be like, "Oh, Trump's group is infighting," and I don't really know if it's infighting or more debate. I think maybe, I mean, depends on who you ask, probably, and who is actually having the conversation. But in terms of, like, for you, Priya, when you're like, you've been doing this for 30 years. Have you felt the shift? Because I had somebody that was working for CNN on, and I've had people that have been appeared on both Fox and CNN on, and I always ask them this as well. Like, do you feel within, like, you go to work, do you feel like, especially the one that was on CNN, I was like, hey, did you feel the public like sentiment and be like, hey, they don't really seem to trust what we're saying anymore. Should we change that? Like, is there a self-awareness within, and maybe this is not so pertinent to your organization, but kind of the mainstream as a whole. Is there a level of self-awareness that there's a skepticism from the public into the reporting from the big outlets in India as well?
No, there is. I don't, and also perhaps not, because in terms of, I mean, now the public knows that what the TV channels are saying, they will criticize the government just a bit, they will not go much further. So there is a sort of benchmark, but a lot of the criticism or this self-awareness, as you say, comes from Twitter, because that is the new town hall. That is where you get all the feedback, and people are now labeled. But it's again, it's a very vicious world out there. If you say something which could be a very objective criticism of the government, you'll be labeled quickly. There are these labels that go on saying, "Oh, you're an opposition, camp follower." Or, as someone said, you are either a chamcha or a morcha. Chamcha means a camp follower, morcha means an activist. So, you can be an independent person in the middle. That independence is not being viewed because it's being objectivity. Don't be neutral, be objective, is my point. When you see something wrong that is happening, call it out. A journalist, that debate goes on a lot. Do we just give the news or do we give views? I think people come to us for viewpoints. They come for, because now each anchor or each journalist has also become a sort of brand name, as is what is happening over there also. So if if you're going to this channel or this anchor, this is where she's coming from. Or, if you're coming to Priya, then this is where, what to expect from her. And, or also a lot of anchors are associated with various close to political leaders. So if you see X person is saying this, oh, she's got it from that minister. So that you can also place your news in terms of the context and the source. My problem, this is something that's been happening. This has, of course, been much amplified with this Modi government, because, and also, as I said, there is just one man. So, you end up being really a camp follower, cult follower, because early on you could be for Congress, but you could criticize Congress because of, the finance ministry is doing something. There were a lot of fights on issues. The environment ministry used to be upset about something the industry ministry was doing, or the finance minister was doing, or, there were socialists, there were capitalists within the government cabinet. What Samir said is absolutely right. Cabinet saw fierce fights happening. There were debates happening on before decisions were taken. Here, decisions are just announced to the cabinet members. They're just taken by the prime minister's office and announced to the rest of the world, the way India is functioning currently. So that is really disappointing. But my problem with the media really is that some people are lending into this communal narrative. For instance, I'll just give you a simple example. If I say speeding BMW at night, driven by an underage boy, comes and kills a pedestrian sleeping on the streets. Now, as a journalist, at 30 years of experience, I can make some assumptions on my own. If it's an underage boy, it's a speeding car. He probably doesn't have a license. He's underage. He's probably drunk. It's 2 o'clock at night. He's rich spoiled kid. The dad's going to probably bend all laws. He's already bent one by giving the kid the BMW. It's also rich versus poor. You can take out various narratives to it. But the minute the anchor says it was a Muslim driver that killed a Hindu boy, then that's what the problem is. You're creating a communal divide. Why give everything a communal slant? That is what was happening a lot in the past few years. And that's something I've been really, really upset about, both as a journalist and as a citizen. That's not where we want to see our country going. So my takeaway from the Pahalgam attack, to just get back to our Kashmir issue, when the terrorists came, they asked the religion of the tourists, are you a Hindu? They wanted them to recite the Quran, couplets from there. And when they couldn't, they shot them. So there was a big UN cry saying this is a Hindu versus Muslim issue, and some attempts were made. But in the end, very swiftly, that narrative was penned down to a India versus Pakistan narrative. I thought that was a very, very positive takeaway. India is, in a sense, coming together, not just being divided on communal lines. And I hope that stays, because the past few years have been really, really disappointing.
Mm.
And the narrative building has been happening in the media also. That's what is upsetting me.
Yeah. Has the government been pressuring the social media companies to remove critical voices similar to the US during COVID?
Yes, yes. Even now, even during the Indo-Pak standoff,
Mm. Is
that
this
has been
been
happening.
is this well known amongst the population, or is this something that you know because of the position that you're in?
No, no, it made it to the newspapers. It was there in the mainstream papers also.
So have you been in a situation where you've been critical of something and gotten a phone call and like about, hey, don't do that? How do you deal with that?
There are ways to deal with it, because for instance, when I do my shows, I'm not a camp follower of this government or any government at the end of the day. So you get the voices you want. You get I host discussion shows. So and I've always maintained that you have to have you get a Congress person and you get a BJP person. Then there are two other voices that you can get. Normal panel is of four people. Now, who are those two voices is very important because a lot of people, in fact, the BJP is very clever because it's got these trained camp followers disguised as independent experts who come on channels, but it's actually one Congress person fighting three BJP spokespersons because all the other experts are trained and it because they kind of emote the same language, they're given the same slogans to shout. The debates are more shouting matches than conversations. So I try to keep conversations going. I know who I'm calling. So, I also research. I call my guests myself. I don't leave it to the guest team. So I do manage to get a balanced, objective panel in place and have a conversation. Then I don't mind. You say your point, you say your point of view, and let's have it out. Let's debate it instead of me just saying this is the right way. And just steer the conversation. So I think there are ways of getting out to it and at least getting an objective conversation out there,
Yeah,
and
because
that nobody has objected to. I mean, in terms of so it's I think there are some do's and don'ts, but by and large you can get away with by having an independent media also.
yeah, because the flip side to that is like you want to remain objective, and if the government does something that you deem as not a good idea, you want to be able to criticize that. But at the same time, if you have sources, you don't want to ruin the sources by like, okay, you're too critical, I'm not going to give you any more information, and all of a sudden the source of information dries up. That seems like a difficult line to kind of be in. Is that a fair
You see,
statement?
no, your objection can be issue based. You don't have to. You can criticize Modi government on demonetization. You can praise him for going ahead with the honest policy on terror. You don't have to be rara. And I think they do take in some shades of gray also. So it's not just a total emergency like situation. There is some valid criticism, and I think maybe for credibility and also you want to when you to come up with a beauty tip. When you dye your hair, you don't dye the entire hair black, you leave a few strands of gray for credibility. So there is that I mean, criticism does come. There are voices that even on the mainstream media that are critical, and I think uh, that's what the government always says when we say, oh, you're coming down heavily on the media. They say, why not? I mean, not the fact that you can say this also means we're not coming down so heavily. So
Yeah, I mean
there is.
that's a very good point.
I mean,
Um,
that's one of the things I think that is so disturbing about the last 3 months, if you wish, in the US, is that we have one, well, we have two political parties. One is entirely supine and useless, and which is the opposition, and the other one is clearly fearing for their jobs in Congress for re-election, but simply unwilling to stand up and say anything at all, literally. And I find that just incredibly disturbing. I don't remember a time in my 40 something years in the United States where you've got a party in Congress that is not happy with a lot of the policies that their president is pursuing and refuses to do anything about it. Not even say so. Forget publicly, they won't even say it privately.
yeah,
We know they're unhappy, but they won't do anything.
it is a bit strange as well because the ones that have been in Congress for a while, it's almost like there's three separate parties at this point. It's like the opposition who, like you mentioned, are useless for the most part. Well, more than the most part. But then you've got the ones that have been in Congress for forever who would be on the Republican side, but then they're almost a completely different party from like this conglomerate of um, Trump RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, like because a lot of them used to be Democrats as well. So it's like it's almost like there's three now, which
Yeah.
also makes it very interesting because some of them are Republican in name. Or like I don't even know what the parties are like. They're going through a kind of alignment shift almost in real
Yes,
time,
that's
and
very
it
true.
and it becomes strange because the ones that have been in government for so long know it one way, only one way, and now that things are shifting, it seems like they're all confused. as well, which I find a little bit interesting too.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
because the thing is that, party policies are generally incoherent anyway, which is why I was
yeah,
saying at the beginning, I would love to teach them some economics. But this realignment, as you said, that's going on in real time, seems to be making them even more incoherent than usual.
yes,
Um, because there's just simply nothing that you can point to either political party, say, oh, this is what this party stands for. They don't stand for anything at this point,
yeah,
other than
either of
re-election.
them, either
Yeah,
of
either
them,
of them.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that becomes a big issue when it comes to then the media because it's like they're either on speaking strictly I'll say the old two parties and the old media, like they're both aligned with each other, and it almost seems like nobody agrees with any of them, which
Yeah.
is also interesting too, because then it creates this distrust of traditional institutions, which I don't know, Priya, if in India that kind of thing is being experienced as well, where it becomes almost the Wild West a little bit. And I'm a little bit more familiar with like the medical kind of health side of things just because of what I like. I'm a soccer trainer, so I pay attention to nutrition and things of that nature. And a lot of the stuff that's come out from very like you hear like the food pyramid was a scam paid for by the big food companies to put all these and it's like it's not even real, but we all followed it for when did it come out in the 60s or something like this. And so now it's
Mm.
like all the traditional kind of institutions that we're like, oh yeah, our doctors are, we know that they'll tell us. And then now I've actually had to start doing deep dives. And like I had an injury, for instance, that was misdiagnosed three times, and then ended up taking me 18 months to recover, a sports related one, recover fully. And so it's like at that point it's like, okay, so the trust in this institution that we've all known, and it has very little to do with kind of even the people that I saw incomplete information, didn't have an MRI, et cetera, et cetera. It's not meant to be to put blame on them. But when I went into the deep dive of like, what is this injury actually? And then also like, what food should I be eating for this? And what nutrients are good for this? And it's like all these things that I had been taught my whole life from people that had a
Yeah.
white coat on are, it's like that guy doesn't know either, and that guy doesn't know, and like everything seems to be crumbling. And so we end up in this world where there's people that are in it just for profit or self gain, and like you have to be wary of that. But also, there's a real problem with the institutions are kind of crumbling in real time. Or is that been experienced in India as well?
Yeah, I mean, this is also what information does. So I think our grandparents had it fine. They ate all the fat, they had the ghee, they had the butter, they lived well, healthy lives at the end of the day. We are the ones who are coming up with a lot of do's and don'ts. And as you said, a lot of it is, agenda based through some profit making company or the other. So yeah, the institutions I would worry about are the four pillars of a democracy, the executive, the judiciary, the media. Are we also being bought, sponsored, because what's happening is because there is. I can speak for the media world. What happens now is, as I spoke about a model of funding, it is a government ad. Second, it's event based. We hold a lot of conclaves where our sponsorship depends on who attends. So if the prime minister attends, we'll get a lot of sponsors. If the top four ministers attend, we get a lot of sponsors. Now, if we are dependent on them to come and attend event, and here they are obliging us, then how critical can we be of them? Because tomorrow I'm going to go to them with that invitation card and say, come for my event. So that is a breaking of another institution, really, in that sense.
Has there been a any sort of move to shift into a more subscriber based or more like independent
Paywalls.
funding base to kind of get away from that?
There are moves not successful at all. I mean, I think everybody would like an independent media. So we have a lot of smaller, not legacy media, but smaller, and again, then you cut down on your infrastructure. So they are YouTube based, they're digital media. I mean, the world is moving towards digital also. So those have a lot of like-minded people, invest funds coming together to support a certain, website or certain project. So, but then again, that becomes partisan. That becomes totally biased also for one view. So total independent in terms of objective media, I think we have to wait and watch that space.
Okay. This might
Correct. Are
be
you familiar with the free press?
like
The
the
newspaper
newspaper.
Yeah,
or
well,
the
the
concept.
Substack now. This
Uh,
remember the journalist Barry Weiss that left the New
yes.
York
Yeah, yeah,
Times a
yeah.
couple of years ago? So
Yeah,
she
yeah.
founded it, and it's designed, it's on Substack. It's designed to be what we're talking about, which is to say independent voices funded directly by subscriptions. And for the moment, it's great. I just wonder, this is a question I'm throwing out to both of you. I just wonder how long something can remain an independent voice if it's funded by independent subscriptions, because aren't subscriptions going to start going one way or the other way?
Well, unless well, I have two thoughts, actually three. One is like if I subscribe to you, Samir, on Substack, let's say, it doesn't ask me what political party I like trust more or whatever when I subscribe. So like you don't know who's subscribing. Like
But I
Samir, do
know
you
my
know?
likes, don't I?
Well, that's
So I put
true.
up a story and then I see that the,
Yeah.
I don't know, left-wing story gets more views than the right-wing story. So I start writing more left-wing stories, for example.
Yeah, it would be a problem of incentives.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Then the other thought, and this kind of goes into maybe a different subject, but in the US as well, we've seen where the the corporate media has started to talk about the independent media more. So like CNN will run a story on maybe like I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tim Pool, but he's got like millions of subscribers on YouTube and does a nightly news show or whatever. And they'll run a story on what he talked about on his YouTube show, which I've found to be a very interesting shift um, as well. So they're doing the same things with Rogan. They're like, "Oh my gosh, can you believe Rogan said blah blah blah?" And it's like this guy was supposed to be the independent one that was like it's completely shifted. Um, that doesn't really answer your question, Samir, but I think it's an interesting point that goes with that because if they start to get so big, the independent ones, that it shifts, then that creates a new dynamic again within the world of journalism and information. And then the other
Yeah,
thing
I worry.
that I was going to ask you, Samir, as well, is if you had in the kind of academic circles, if you had noticed some level of institutional trust crumbling from
Oh,
like
it's gone.
yeah,
It's entirely gone because in private, professors will tell you all kinds of things about what's going on at their institutions that they will absolutely not even put in an email.
mm,
They're that scared. And you know, the for lack of a better term, it's a terrible term, but I mean, I guess I'll use it because I can't think of a better one. Sort of this got to a peak with the woke movement on campus,
yeah,
and with the trigger warnings and the microaggressions and all the rest of it.
that happened while I was in college. I saw it.
Yes. So the thing is though that the number of administrators in colleges has gone up, I think, tenfold in the last 30 years, and the number of professors has remained static, something like that. I forget the exact numbers. And all those administrators are basically making more work for more administrators, and a lot of it is policing this sort of thing. And at most universities, it's crazy. Even in areas where, like in the sciences, where you or engineering, where there's really no politics to talk about. What politics you can talk about? You know, when you're a chemical engineer, either it works or it doesn't. I mean, that's all there is to it. No, even there's politics. I mean, to give you an absurd example, I read a review of this Stephen Wolfram is a guy that I've spoken to you about before, and he has a theory of physics. Like it or don't like it doesn't matter. Put it out there for everybody to look at. And some physicist was interviewed on that theory, and her response was, "Well, he's a white man. Why do I need to look at any physics theory from a white guy? What? Who cares what his
Oh.
color is? Is it right or wrong? Is it useful or not useful? I mean, come on."
Yeah.
So it's even on campus, it's gone completely nuts.
So
It's very
what's
haywire.
You know,
so what's
if I may quickly come in, sorry,
yeah,
Eric,
yeah.
we had the same issue during the vaccinations. We had a made in India vaccine, and we had the Indian version of AstraZeneca, and that was divided into left wing and right wing, pro BJP and anti BJP, because BJP is all into nationalism and made in India, while the liberals are seen to be aping the West. So there was one section going for the Western AstraZeneca versus that. So even our vaccinations became politicized instead of saying which one works, we were saying, which one is made in India and which one is Western. Sorry.
Yeah. So I guess like what's I'll leave this to both of you, but like what's maybe you can speak to it in your own kind of areas of expertise, but like what's the fix to that? Because it seems, at least in the US, that there's no coming back for a lot of these places. Like you, academia is there's no coming back from for a lot of that. Um, the legacy media, there's no coming back for a lot of that as well. And so while I would say that institutions and trust in institutions are needed for like a high trust democratic society, they have abused that trust to the point where like it's kind of it. And so is there a fix to that makes sense without, I mean, like I mentioned before, we're going to be in an instance where people are going to come take advantage of I'll use power vacuum loosely, but people are going to come take advantage of that, say, no, I'm the one that knows everything about whatever subject it is. And while people are squabbling about who actually has the right credentials or this or that, right? We've seen this a lot in about kind of various issues where, oh, well, this person doesn't have a degree, but this person read X number of books, and so who actually knows? Like, is there a fix or like what do you guys see as the situation to kind of rebuild trust in like even if we call it journalism, like in the US it doesn't have to be we have to rebuild trust in the New York Times, but in a journalist, like people I think hear journalists and they're like it's a negative reaction off the jump, or professor, it can be a negative reaction off the jump. Like how do we, and I'll leave it for, I guess Samir, looks like you have a thought, so I'll leave it with you first and then Priya.
I have a utopian thought for you.
Sure.
I'm not claiming that this will happen, but there is a way to fix it. So the problem with the US government is that we are not philosophically inclined as a country to have a European style large welfare state. We're not. And we need to recognize that. Um, and that's, of course, what makes the US different. If that's the case, we are not the type of country that can ask our government to do lots and lots and lots of things. What we need to do is to have a government that does less but does it better.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would like is to have two sane parties, neither is sane at this point, which is sad, but anyway, I would like to have two sane parties sit down for a little while, talk to each other without shouting, and figure out what it is that they can reach a consensus on that they want the government to do. And then do that and do it well and fund it with whatever necessary funding is required to do that well. What we do instead is that we basically have Congress constantly worrying about whether they're going to get reelected. And so Congress has found, and the Supreme Court hasn't stopped it, which is sad, it has found that the best way to get reelected is to keep giving its power away. So so eventually then you could just throw your hands up and say, I can't do anything, I'm only a member of Congress. So for example, this tariff authority was given by Congress to the president.
Yep.
I don't even understand how they can do that. It should be non-delegatable, but let's put that aside. So it's really twofold. One, you have to have your elected representatives do their job, which is to actually pass laws, not just keep throwing their powers away, telling the administrative state to write the laws. And the second thing is, whatever it is that you want to do, you need to do less of it and do it well. So I'll give you an example. My friend Alex Tabarrok, who's a professor of economics, said pithily not long ago that the United States is simultaneously over-policed and under-policed. So the benefits of putting more police on the street are, I think, some multiple of the salary that we pay them. So it's a no-brainer. On the other hand, we keep making them do completely futile tasks, which are beneath them, writing traffic tickets or finding some guy who's went 75 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone because they want to get, tickets to fund stuff and so on. Instead of actually having them get out there, deal with crime, deal with problems, all the rest of it. We just don't do that. That's really the problem. We've got to get our government to do what it needs to do and do less at the same time.
Priya.
But that's utopia.
No, I do think the churn is happening to an extent because, and it will happen because it's not, nothing is, constant at the end of the day. So there is because once the public starts getting more vocal and it's linked to the government, government media, they're all institutions that are linked. So the minute you see the current government falling and tripping a bit too often, then, we always said that Modi will be defeated by Modi himself. He's going to, like Indira Gandhi, she was another very powerful prime minister. She fell because of her own hubris, because of her own policies when she tried to impose emergency or she became too dictatorial. Same thing we are seeing is probably going to be happening over here because unless if there is not a strong opposition, then you fall on your own contradictions. And we've seen the media also, the public will take that much and no more. So there is pressure from the public because we also have to sell those newspapers. It's that much you can depend on the government ads. And if the government comes on too heavily, the public will start questioning. So that I've seen the murmurings have started. They start ridicule is the first form of this thing. Early on, the jokes were all against Rahul Gandhi. Now the jokes are coming up against Prime Minister Modi. So there is a little bit of the what do you call it? Skepticism, criticism coming in from the public that is also now being reflected in our papers and in our mainstream media. Questions are being raised. So I think the churn has begun and they will be self-correct.
That's good. I think one positive of this maybe last 10 years has been I think the public has become a lot more vocal, generally speaking. The internet, I think, has helped with that. But I think, um, I mean, I was not really that old when kind of 9/11 happened and all these other things, but a lot of things just in the beginning of the like 2000 to 2010 just kind of happened. And then it seemed like in 2014, 15, 16, then all of a sudden these YouTube channels started popping up and gaining subscribers, and people started feeling a lot more free to be angry and like and vocal about what they thought, whether it's rational or irrational. But I think people started paying attention more, maybe as well, a little bit. I don't know if you guys agree with that. And then the other thing,
I
Samir,
do.
as a side note to what you were saying, is like it feels like there's a business off kind of the regulatory state. It's like people that know the regulations and can, like the lawyers and these sorts of people that are experts in like whatever subject it is, there's like a business off like
Yep.
being able to navigate through that, and that business model has been able to propagate. Um, but but yeah, just in terms of I don't know, do you guys agree that people are paying more attention now? Is that do you think, or because by the same token, there's so much going on that it seems difficult to keep track of it all. And so like when I talk to friends, they're like, "How do you know all this?" I'm like, "I'm a psycho. Don't listen to me. I spend way too much time listening to all these things. Like I should be, going to the gym and talking with friends, and instead I'm listening to 27 like people talk about current events in the world. Anyways, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Priya, do you want to go first? Have you seen that? Does it seem like people are paying attention more in India recently, the last maybe 5, 10 years than before?
I don't know if they're paying attention or not, but everybody definitely has a view and they're saying it. Earlier on, they didn't know how to express it. Now, thanks to social media, thanks to Twitter, thanks to various outlets, Instagram, everybody with a mobile phone has a camera, has a view, and is expressing it. So there is this information overload, really. And the minute you say once, there is all the shades of gray are coming out to every story. So that's interesting because, that makes it more democratic and also forces a change that maybe the mainstream media could not do on its own. So I think definitely people are, there is a lot of information going around and everybody is ready to share and give their views. And people are listening.
That's good. Well, it's always good to listen,
Yeah.
generally.
Yeah.
Samir?
I would say I would agree with that, and I would say something else that's very interesting is that um, if we survive this current bout of silliness that we have in our government, the United States has a lot of soft power in the world. And it's very powerful soft power because all the social media platforms in the world outside of China that are of any value whatsoever are all American, every single one of them. AI is American too. Um, and if you think about all of this technology as it starts to spread around the world, what is it going to be? What is it going to spread? It's largely going to be spreading the sorts of values that people have in, say, Silicon Valley or, America as a whole, or any of these other things. Generally speaking, by and large, pretty easygoing, tolerant, relatively libertarian, all that sort of thing. But the problem is that, at the moment, we seem to be trying to destroy our soft power as quickly as we possibly can. The hope is that that doesn't actually happen, because then, exactly as you said, with the social media, and exactly as Priya said, people can express what they want to express, other people can express things back to them. And finally, there's a way of getting, for the first time in human history, of getting all of the opinions of all of the people into a public sphere where everyone can actually look at them. That's never happened before, because always you had to channel your opinions through this person who told that person who told that person who told that person. It was never the case that every single person on earth could have their views aired, and then it's up to other people what they want to do with those views. That hasn't happened before, and that's all a Silicon Valley invention.
Yeah. I do wonder as well if, like, I don't know if you would teach this in school or whatever, but how to process information just like person to person, because that skill, like, it's a skill to be able to go through, just like scroll through things, or to take in kind of five, six, seven viewpoints about the same story, and kind of sort through, okay, well, all seven of them said this part, so that's probably true, and two of them said that part, but four of them didn't, so maybe not that part. And like how to be able to like do that pattern recognition, um, and that's going to
It's
be a
funny you
thing.
say that,
Yeah, yeah.
because I've three-quarters written my next book, which is exactly on that topic. But I need to sell this one first, otherwise I'm not going to be able to do anything with that one. But that is really what it's about. And the idea is that what I wanted to do in that book is every chapter is a potted history of the current state of knowledge in a given field. So instead of you having to wade through 300 papers in that field, I'm actually just going to tell you, listen, this is the current state of knowledge. These are the uncertainties. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. And I wanted to do that in politics, in business, in finance, and in economics.
Mm.
And so that's what I've done. And so each chapter is a small self-contained chapter of a few pages that says, listen, this is the truth in this area. This is the truth in this area. This is the truth in this area, as much as we know. And then you can use that framework to read the news and decide what's true and what's not.
Priya, is there
That sounds
anything?
interesting, Samir.
So thank you.
Priya, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should?
I think we covered the media, we covered state of politics in India. I think that seems to cover it.
All right. Do you have any last thoughts or nickels before we get you out of here? I know it's an early morning for you, so I appreciate the time, but you got any last like kind of thoughts that you would leave the listeners with?
I think it's I think each time is the time of churn, but the times that we are living in is more there are less constants than any other time. So these are interesting times. I think everybody, especially because, as we said, there's so much knowledge going on. It's now the time has come really for us to look within ourselves and try and separate the wheat from the chaff, the noise from the news, etc., because it's really the value systems have to now come. So we have to go back to our old value systems to figure out the new that is out there. And that's whether you're in India or in America, it's to deal with the madness outside, find the peace within, I think.
Yeah, that's a good message for sure. Samir?
I would say this. There was a great senator, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And one of the interesting things that he used to say in the 1960s and early 1970s is that you may not realize it, but in fact, there's an enormous number of commonalities between the United States and India. And one of the things I would urge Americans, and vice versa, urge Indians too, is try to understand the other country. Why? Because it will repay you in letting you understand your own country. Because the commonalities are great. Um, Apart from just being democratic and now India being capitalist and so on and business friendly, there's a lot more than that. There's the English language. It's the fact that they were both British colonies. The sense of humor is not all that different, actually. There's a lot of commonalities, and you can learn a lot about the United States by studying India, and vice versa. You can learn a lot about India by studying the US.
That's a good point as well. Priya, you mentioned you had some books and stuff that you had written or kind of helped write. Where can the people listening go find those if they want to buy them or read them or learn more? Are they on Amazon or where's a good place for people to go look for your work?
My favorite question, Eric. Thank you for asking that. Well, I have a book right here with me. I don't know we can show. It's you can find it on Amazon. It's called The Contenders: Who Will Lead India Tomorrow. So it's a profile of 16 next generation leaders. Some in the opposition, some in the government, current BJP also. It's through my conversations with them, and I've seen them when they actually join politics. So I've seen them grow. And the interesting part, if I may, Eric, is most of them, India has been criticized that most of our leadership is dynastic. It's also, yes, it is second generation, third generation leaders, and these kids have gone abroad. They've come up with their pedigree. They've come with their fancy degrees, Harvard, Oxford, Lincoln's Inn, etc. And then they come to India, and they first, I've also seen the experiments with Indian democracy when they come and they try with they've come with the Excel sheets, the Microsoft, the charts. They'll look at the caste equation of each constituency. This is what will appeal, the opinion polls, whatever. But in the end, you cannot understand India, you cannot chart India, and they end up talking. When they come back, the conversation, they try to do it the right in terms of a very organized way, but there's nothing calibrated and organized about India, certainly not the elections. And they end up talking, asking votes in the old way, whether they will go in for the caste dynamics or they will go in for the personality, the local issues, the slogans. So I've seen that change. I've seen how they've tried to effect a change, but then the change happens to them rather than what happens. India remains constant. So that's something which I've tried to capture and bring out as to what will they do with their fancy degrees and fancy pedigrees when they come to India, and then they it all becomes a level playing field.
Yeah. You optimistic about the future?
I am, because simply because people are questioning. I think this the public that is coming up. We're seeing a lot of people from the citizen, from the normal public also, to try and join the government, whether they form a political party or through some way or the other. So I do see some change happening. I hope it's for the better.
Good. Love to hear. Samir, well, if I let you talk again, you'll bring the mood down. So I'm not just kidding.
Well, I just say, please buy my book so that I can convince somebody to publish a second one.
Yeah. So link for Samir's book will be in the description, as it has been for the last 3 or 4 episodes. Or again, highly recommend people go read it. It's if you want to know about free will and also have your brain explode at the same time, it's a great book for that. Samir, I'll give the last kind of thoughts to you before we close out.
Yeah, all I would say is thanks, Eric, for the forum, and thanks, Priya, for joining. I think that we can learn a lot about the American media landscape from seeing what's happening to the media landscape in other parts of the world. And to me, the biggest and most interesting thing that's happening is Substack, and the fact that on Substack, finally, there are independent voices that are actually getting paid for the independent voices. So I would encourage everybody, please, I'm on Substack too, I'm free, to please check out Substack, check out all the writers on Substack, because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. It's generally serious, very little of it is fluff, and you can probably find a lot of interesting stuff there if you look for it.
Oh yeah, I should also mention that I joined Substack too, so go there for this as well. Yeah, so for those listening, thank you guys for listening. As always, go check out the Substack. I should probably put the link to that somewhere. I'll put it in the description too. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Peace.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you want to watch another episode like this one, click there. If you want to subscribe, click there.